In 2006, a man named Craig Monte entered the Islamic Center of Irvine, California for the first time. He was interested in Islam and was looking to convert. He was embraced by the community and soon took the Shahada. But within a few months, Craig's interest in Islam took a dark turn. He began asking questions about jihad, even going as far as to suggesting plans for a terrorist attack. Concerned members of the mosque reported him to mosque leadership, who then passed this on to the FBI. The FBI investigated him, which led to Craig's 8-month imprisonment. Upon his release, Craig felt betrayed, but not at the Muslim community, but at the FBI. He had just spent 18 months working with the FBI to spy on the Muslim community of Irvine, California. He wondered how he had found himself a victim of the very same agency that he had just collaborated with. So looking for revenge, he exposed the operation that he was a part of. Operation Flex. Surveillance constitutes one of the major ways in which Islamophobia manifests, as it reflects the underlying belief that every member of the Muslim community must be put under constant scrutiny, as any one of them is capable of harboring intents for the next major terrorist attack.
Ridiculous. Even it gets
So hold on, are you the person who understands the officially codified doctrine of Islam? You're the interpreter of that, so you can say, well, this is...
I'm actually well educated on this topic.
I'm asking you. So you're saying if I criticize you're saying that Islamophobia is not a real thing. That if you're critical of something...
Well, it's not a real thing when we do it.
Right.
Well, no,
it really isn't.
The phrase Islamophobia has integrated itself into mainstream discourse. But despite this, there still remains a fundamental misunderstanding of what Islamophobia actually entails. That is because it is believed that this irrational fear of Muslims only arose after the aftermath of 9/11. Though this is not entirely not true, it is a pretty shallow understanding of what Islamophobia actually entails. That is because Islamophobia is not just the irrational fear of Muslims. It is a broader apprehension towards Islam as a religion, claiming that it is a uniquely violent ideology. Therefore, we must fear its followers.
And we have to be able to criticize bad ideas. And
Of course we do. No liberal doesn't want to criticize bad
But
ideas.
Islam at this moment is the motherlode of bad ideas.
Jesus.
So we have
That's just
ideas
a
like
fact.
Now, obviously, this is not true. I could point towards many other theological texts that are just as violent as Islam. I could also point towards the fact that the overwhelming majority of Muslims, the people who actually practice Islam, are peaceful people. And in fact, this is what most people who try to go against Islamophobia try to do. And it's exactly why they fail to adequately characterize it.
Or how about the more than 1 billion people who aren't
Muslims
fanatical, who don't punch women, who just want to go to the store,
Wait a second.
sandwiches,
Wait a
break
second.
5 times a day,
Right.
and
Wait a
don't do
second.
any of the things that you're saying all Muslims
Instead, I believe that in order to completely address Islamophobia, we have to increase our understanding of it as a phenomenon. This means that rather than just dismissing it, we need to engage it head on in a critical manner. So, with that being said, let's start at the beginning. In 1859, Charles Darwin proposed a theory of evolution based off what he called natural selection. Darwinism, as it became to be known, proposed the idea that species evolved through a process of survival and reproduction of members within the species with advantageous traits. Though his theory was primarily focused on biological life, the scientific method that he used to study life was applied to the study of human social structures. This was known as social Darwinism. Social Darwinism found influence in many fields in the social sciences and the humanities. But in today's time, we are able to recognize that this ideology was not completely accurate, as it did not account for the complexity of human societies. And because of this, social Darwinism actually was a pretty dangerous ideology, as it suggested that there was some races within the human species that had more advantageous traits than other races, explicitly implying that existing hateful ideologies within the West, such as anti Semitism, were a consequence of natural order. This social Darwinist perspective was applied to the study of human populations that the West sought to colonize. Edward Said was the first person to observe this, calling it Orientalism. Said observed that as the West expanded its powers, it sought to understand the people that they were conquering in order to facilitate this process of colonization. Orientalism exposed that this process was disguised as the pursuit of objective knowledge that were found through scientific methods, such as social Darwinism. When the reality was that this scientific process just sought to reinforce the existing binary view of the world, where the West was viewed as rational and civilized, and the East was viewed as irrational and uncivilized. Within this context is where Islam is now implicated. That is because, despite its coexistence with Judeo Christianity, Islam is practiced by the people of the East, in Asia, and in Africa. Therefore, it is viewed as the religion of the uncivilized and irrational people. Islamophobia creates the notion that Islam is the ideological cause of this irrationality and backwardness.
Oh, you must be hungry. Here you go.
You'd better be able to pay for that.
Pay?
No one steals from my cart.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I don't have any money.
Thief!
Oh, please. If you let me go to the palace, I can get some from the Sultan.
Do you know what the penalty is for stealing?
No! No, please!
Oh, thank you, kind sir. I'm so glad you found her. I've been looking all over for you.
So now let's fast forward again. How did we get where we are today?
Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
So the year is 1990. It is the dawn of a new decade. Germany had recently reunified, marking how the times were about to change. Because just a year later, the Soviet Union would collapse, the end of the Cold War. Optimism was in the air. Political theorist Francis Fukuyama writes about this sense of optimism. In his book, The End of History, Fukuyama argues that the ideological struggles that have shaped human history have reached their end, with the ultimate victor being found in Western liberalism. But on the other end of the aisle, political theorist Samuel Huntington disagreed. He believed that despite the West's ideological victory in the Cold War, a new conflict was brewing on the lines of civilizations, with a focus on the Western civilization and the Muslim civilizations. He called it the clash of civilizations. After I read a little bit more of Samuel Huntington's ideology, I found that it fell into classical Orientalist traps. I mean, for one, what Huntington calls civilizations just plays on this existing binary view of the world. And then on top of that, instead of presenting a neutral analysis, Samuel Huntington effectively acts as a partisan advocate for one civilization over another. Nonetheless, given Huntington's establishment in foreign policy on top of the military-industrial complex that was built during the Cold War, his worldview was adopted by Western foreign policymakers, leading to a new series of invasions and occupations in the Middle East and in Africa. At exactly 9:20 p.m. on April 10th, 1992, a bomb was detonated in the heart of England's financial center. The group that claimed responsibility had used materials that they had sourced from Libya. In the claim of responsibility, they cited Britain's occupation of their land as a cause for the attack. This group was none other than the Provisional Irish Republican Army, or the IRA. The IRA believed that they could use terrorism to exert pressure on the British government to negotiate and even concede independence for Northern Ireland.
When a white man tears down a prison, he is trying to liberate himself. When I tear down a prison, I'm simply turning into another savage.
The reality is that terror as a political tactic has widely been used by people that have been subjected to occupation by a stronger foreign force. Yet terrorism from Muslims is not viewed within this lens. And of course, I'm not trying to justify terrorism, nor am I saying that it should be okay for Muslims to do terrorist attacks. What I am saying is, when we fail to acknowledge the social-political underpinnings that lead to terrorist attacks, we fail to address the root causes of radicalization. This then leads to a perpetuation of violence. Violence that begins with invasions and occupations that cause a violent reaction from the affected populations, creating a whirlpool where each side just reinforces the extreme on the other side.
October the 7th happened. You're placing that in historical context. I understand that. Please don't say that again. We don't have time for it. You've made that point 5 times already.
I don't know what you have time for.
Oh my God, for the love of God, let me finish a sentence, man. Maybe you're not used to women talking. I don't know. But I'd like to finish a sentence, sir. Anyway.
It's still insane to me that you can go on national television and say things about Muslims that would not be okay for any other people. But at the same time, I'm not really surprised because I understand that these things that are being said about Muslims are the same things that were being said about colonized people. It's just now the framework has changed. In today's time, Islamophobia is the underlying belief system that seeks to perpetuate colonial violence. Its victims are the hundreds of thousands of innocent Muslims that were killed during the War on Terror. It is the millions that have been displaced just over the past few months. When historians study our era, they will recognize that Islamophobia is an ideology that has led to some of the most violent and inhumane acts of the early 21st century. Having Muslim friends does not make you immune to Islamophobia. Being against Islamophobia means being against all the invasions and occupations that Muslims all over the world have been subjected to.
If you don't think Israel's reaction is acceptable, what would have been an acceptable reaction to you? You've got 10 seconds left.
To end occupation and allow peace to prevail for both people.